Welcome back, listeners. OMG, have we got a treat for you. We are honored to have this week's guest on our show. We felt like we met a rock star. He was there to help shape our modern-day ADA laws. He was also the co-director of an amazing Netflix documentary, Crip Camp, and so much more.
You're going to love this episode, so don't miss out. Please remember, if you love the show, to share it with a friend and even let us know on social media. Thanks, and enjoy this episode with Jim Lebrecht.
Ladies and gentlemen, in this corner, Eddie Gagnon! And in the opposite corner, Kristen Gagnon! This is What's Special About Special.
I wanted to say that.
Well, hello there. My name's Eddie Gagnon.
Eddie, I don't want to be here all night.
Welcome and thank you for joining us. My name's Eddie Gagnon. That was perfect. Kristen.
Your voice.
So we'd like to welcome to the show Jim Lebrecht. You are a filmmaker, a disability rights activist, and the director of the Netflix documentary Crip Camp.
Yeah, he co-directed it with Nicole Noonan and co-produced it with her as well.
Awesome. So welcome to the show, Jim. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you.
Be here. This is cool. Thank you.
This is really exciting for us. We've been real excited to kind of have you on. For us, this is like, we kind of had it when we first started kind of picturing the podcast and what it would be. We had this dream guest list of like, I think 5 or 10 people that we were like, one day we want to make sure we interview this person, this person, this person. And definitely on the top of our list was you. I will say for sure. Right when we started the podcast or just streaming of the podcast, we saw Crip Camp, and the first 10 minutes of Crip Camp, you know, you're featured in it and you come right on and you talk about, and we'll get into it as we talk, but you talk about your disability and that you have spina bifida, and our son has spina bifida. So for us, the minute the words came out of your mouth, we were like, oh, we were like yelling at our son, having him come in the room. It was like up on the screen in the living room. I mean, it's such a small thing that there's a connect, you know, that, oh, there's just somebody else. It should be a small thing, right? That there's just somebody else on TV that has the same disability as our child, as him. But in our house, it's a big deal. There's not always someone that looks like you or, you know, walks like you or has something the same disability as you on a TV screen. And so in our house, that's a huge deal. And we didn't even know what we were watching.
Well, I mean, it is a huge deal. And one of the things that, you know, I've seen is that we lack such representation or accurate representation on TV or in the movies. And that indeed, I mentioned this in the film. I grew up really not seeing anybody like me on TV except for, you know, telethons where they were using pity to raise funds for this charity or that charity.
Yes.
How old is your son?
He's 8 now.
Far up.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. It was super, you know, and we turned on the documentary having zero clue what the documentary was about. We really thought it was just about a camp, which in itself was exciting for us to think, oh, there's this group of people who started a camp, and, you know, no idea where turn the documentary takes and the advocacy and everything you guys have done. And so, you know, that, you know, we want to get into that as well, because I want to make sure that we kind of talk to our listeners about everyone we talk to. We're like, you have to see this documentary. You have to hear everything. Did you even know the story behind this and how this all?
Like, we already seen it.
Yes. Yeah. Or people are like, yeah, of course we saw that. And we're like, well, we didn't. We need you to know all about it. Tell everybody. But so that was, you know, even more exciting for us. And so, you know, to start there, that was exciting. But we really want to know from you. Tell us a little bit to start about your story. Where are you from? Where did you grow up? Tell us a little bit about you.
All right. Well, I am 64 years old. And I grew up in Westchester County, just north of New York City.
You do not look 64, just to let you know, Jim.
As
you
I
look
like
great.
Joke is, thank you. As I like to joke, my sister got the legs and I got the hair. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, and but obviously you can't see me right now, but clean living has really been my hallmark, and that's not even true. That's not even true either. So I spent the first 18 years through high school in the New York in Westchester. I was very fortunate that I had a special ed teacher who really encouraged my parents to try to get me into public school, because there was I was excelling in in class and felt like I would do well in public school. And I, back in 1962 or so, I was an experiment in our school district.
Wow.
So, and folks who've grown up as part of the 504 or the ADA generation, there were no mandates that kids with disabilities could go to public school to, be with the non-disabled kids.
Mm-hmm.
So, and in reality, I mean, this could have been taken away from me right through high school.
Yeah.
Right.
Somebody could have said, I don't know, I think we're wasting time educating him, or Lord knows what else they could have come up with. But that one decision and that one experiment on the part of the Greenberg School District really saved my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so for there, I went off to San Diego to go to college in the fall of 1974. And I just wound up studying drama there. I was kind of into sound already, and I thought maybe I was going to become an acoustics major, and then found out that it's all math and physics. And man, no, now you're talking numbers. What? And so I want to get involved with the drama department, and really have had wound up after college having a great career in regional theater, working for the Berkeley Repertory Theater that you see in the film, but also doing sound for other theaters on the West Coast, like La Jolla Playhouse and the Old Globe Theater in San Diego, and even did sound effects for one show at the Public Theater in New York, which was...
Some of those are not small potatoes.
No, it's not. But, it's like even that. So, I take that, for example, 1982, there's no way to get a wheelchair into that building without going with steps.
Yeah.
And so not only, but I had worked with this playwright, Des McAnoff, who was remounting a musical that I worked on with him on the West Coast here. And he wanted me to do his sound effects. So I had to spend probably close to an hour talking to their production manager, convincing them that I could climb out of my wheelchair and get to where I needed to get to.
Wow.
To do my job. But I had grown up in this little house.
Yeah.
So my wheelchair was always in the garage. I crawled all around house, which, really prepared for me a life in the theater.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and as a theater geek myself, and I think for someone who isn't been in, who's not around theater as much, it's not even traditional like a house in a theater. It's straight up and down stairs most of the time to get into those areas that you're getting into to do the sound, or in that area. It's straight up and down those stairs a lot of the time, those back of houses.
Yeah. So, I mean,
it's tall. It's a lot of stairs.
I wasn't Superman, but I was in really great shape in my 20s. And so at the old, the Berkeley Rep, fortunately, was building a new theater when I joined them right after college in 1978. So for 2 years, I was climbing upstairs out of my wheelchair that were going up the outside of, the theater, which is actually basically a house that had been like lifted up years ago. And it basically is your basic beginning repertory theater, space. And But when they moved into their new space in downtown Berkeley, there was an elevator. There were ramps in places, and I remember looking at their plans for the building, and I noticed this one spot that was a step, and I said, "This needs to be a ramp." And Lord knows, because if I hadn't been around, maybe that would have gotten by them. And it was like that was a ramp that I took 5 or 6 times a day at least.
Yeah.
So anyway, and from there I kind of moved into film, doing audio for film, sound effects editing. There was at the time this great post-production facility owned and run by Saul Zaentz, the movie producer. And Saul had done The English Patient and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Amadeus. And here was this great facility with a bunch of editing rooms and mix stages and such. And I just started trying to make inroads with some of the sound supervisors there, getting them tickets to shows I did at Berkeley Rep, and said, let's get a beer afterwards, and just developed some casual friendships and such. So when I decided it was time to leave the theater, I had some people I could turn to, and fortunately I got a break and got on a show.
Nice.
And then I guess to kind of end up my resume before the film, a few years later, I started my own sound company within the building where the film center was. And we really focused on documentary film.
Yeah.
And really kind of focusing on the loving care and the sound design concepts, and really looking at very thoroughly the way that I had learned in theater.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I ran that company until a couple of years ago, but Crip Camp was starting to really rev up, and so now Crip Camp is out in the world, and it's getting a wonderful audience. And Nicole and I have made the film. We are, looking at other projects to do, and who knows, we could be doing some stuff in the future ourselves. But for the moment, it's still just really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be keeping you busy now, at least, for sure.
Let me tell you, leading up to 8830, you wouldn't believe what our calendars look like, but it's like, you want to say yes to as much as you can, to support our community and to be there, and that there's so much beyond the film itself that you see that's important to us on the film. And part of that is our impact campaign that we had raised funds for, and we can get into that now or later. But I think that really the thing that was most important to us was that people realize this is just one story.
Yeah.
And that our community has got so many other stories and so many other people. And we really focused the film on these people that went to Camp Jenad, that went on in their lives to be involved politically in the movement. And, even Lionel Woodyard, one of the counselors, he wasn't at the 504 sit-in, but he went and worked around people with disabilities for many, many years. And, he's been the heart and soul of the Camp Jenad spirit for so many years.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So,
you talked a little bit about, kind of what propelled your future with, a teacher kind of, a special ed teacher kind of catapulting you into that mainstream kind of public school world. What kind of influence did your parents have? I imagine, you must have some sort of parents that really motivated or just were motivated to say, listen, we know that he's, he will do fine. He can do this. Like, what were your parents like as far as an influence where they were just like, let's go for this?
Both my parents tried to raise me Certainly not ignoring the fact that I had spina bifida and that I can't walk, but that they wanted me to be self-sufficient. They wanted me to experience the world and to know how to navigate it on my own.
Yeah.
And so, as you may remember from the film, my father gave me some very, very good advice, saying, hey, Jimmy, you're going to have to be outgoing because people are not likely to come up and just strike up a conversation with you, and there's nothing cruel about that. I mean, that's the truth.
I think we hear that time and time again, almost everybody we speak to. Two themes that continue to run. One is you're going to have to be your own advocate. Like, you're in charge. Someone isn't going to be in charge for you. You're going to have to be in charge of the situation for yourself. Whether that's with doctors, whether that's with, a boss, whether that's out in the world, whatever, you're going to have to be your own advocate. Someone isn't going to be that advocate for you. That's number one. And two, the big theme's always been like exactly what you said, and I always wonder, is it the chicken or the egg? Like, we see our son is so outgoing. We call him the mayor. We say he's like the mayor of everything, because he's going to just be the energy, he's the light of the room. He's going to talk to everybody. He kind of runs the show. But then I always wonder, is that his natural personality, or is that just how we set the tone because he's had to kind of be that way? Because if he's not that way, he's kind of on his own. He's going to set the tone for the room so that he is going to make friends. Because if he does that, everyone's going to come to him that way. Versus if he doesn't, he's just kind of alone in the corner. It almost kind of sets its own way by doing that. It's interesting.
Some of us are just really shy in this world.
Yeah.
And some of us are, really gregarious and outgoing. And I think that what's important is to recognize who your kid is, but to encourage them, not force them necessarily, but sometimes you have to go to the deep end of the swimming pool once or twice.
Yeah.
But on the other side of it is don't get in the way.
Yeah.
Don't encourage bad habits in regards to, gee, I'd rather just stay and play video games all day.
Yeah.
Like any other child you may know or have, that kid needs to be out of the house.
Yeah. You can be shy, but still experience the world.
Exactly. And I've heard stories of parents who, after, their kid graduates high school, that kid's in their room playing video games. And I don't think it's because they cannot succeed in the world. I think that parents can be overprotective.
Yeah.
That they can have low expectations for their kid and just want to be, make sure that they're safe and never disappointed or never hurt.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really easy right now. I think in general, it's easy to do that as a parent. We kind of live in a world where it's almost become the narrative in this generation to be a little more overprotective. But then you add on top of that, I know my experience as a parent, you add on top of that, where if your child comes into this world fighting, I'm on the defense to protect them extra. So then it's a lot harder to kind of step back and be like, you can do it. I'm not going to extra protect you. It's really hard sometimes to kind of step back and let them, almost bite your tongue metaphorically in a way and just go, I'm just not going to do this one. He's a lot better at it than I am.
Yeah. I'm good luck. I had to do it too.
I'll be over there drinking a beer. Let me know.
Exactly.
Holler if you need me.
Yeah. Holler. Oh my God. I think that I did have kind of that kind of gregarious personality. Yeah. And I met a woman. There was a wonderful documentary came out, maybe 15 years ago, called My Flesh and Blood. And it was about this woman who lives probably about 25 miles north of where I am in Oakland, California. And she had adopted all these different kids with disabilities. And we have my wife and I were heading off to Sundance Film Festival, and the film was premiering there. And we happened to be on the same flight with this mother who had adopted these kids. And we started talking about, well, I have spina bifida. And she says, well, so-and-so in the film, she's got spina bifida. She's got this like cocktail party personality, and I don't know if that rings true for you and your boy.
Yes.
I mean, I think that's me. I once crawled down, so living in the suburbs, I like crawled out of the house onto the lawn of my next door neighbor and kept on going down the street, but knocking on the doors and basically saying, hi, my name is Jim and I'm looking for friends.
Yes. Sometimes, they say, we go to doctor's appointments and they'll say, this is a quote side effect of spine, but this is a side. I'm like, well, is this amazing personality? Can we just add that to the list? Because he is everybody I meet. Like every other kid we're in like a group with, and like that also has spina bifida, have the same personality. They all have this like amazing, like over the top, like they're all little mayors. They all want to play with everybody. They're all like ready to go. Nobody's shy. I'm like, who are all these kids?
Well,
they're going to be running the world.
In our son's case, though, he gets a lot of it from me.
Oh,
so
okay.
I feel like
Yeah, I can tell.
So, do you think now you just kind of transition it? I mean, the documentary is based around the camp Jenad, Jenad, right?
Jenad.
You were a camper there. Were you were you a camper of the first kind of set of campers, or was this camp around before you kind of started going there?
It really had started in the early 1950s as a camp for kids and adults with disabilities.
Oh, okay.
So
your group of campers were kind of just a really extra special group that kind of found each other.
Well, there's so many different things that kind of came together. Judy Heumann who's in the film, who, if you don't know who she is kind of a legendary disability rights icon and leader. And, she had been a camper there for a number of years.
Okay.
When I started going to camp that summer, she was on staff there. I think she was probably running girls' teen camp or co-running it. And, first off, meeting Judy Heumann was like this incredible, like lightning bolt.
Yeah.
Because, where do I begin? She had, I knew that she had filed suit to get a teaching position because she had gotten her license and everything, but the New York City school district refused to give her a position, saying she was a fire hazard, or she couldn't get the kids out, or she couldn't, help them go to the bathroom, or whatever else it was.
Yeah, whatever they were
coming up with. And she prevailed in that lawsuit. They settled before it went to trial. And so as a 15-year-old, and I don't remember what you were like when I was 15. You were 15, but the world's not fair. I hate everybody.
Yeah.
Nothing's right, and it should be fixed.
Yeah.
But as somebody with a disability, especially back then, there's no curb cuts. There's no ramps into buildings. Like, it's just really difficult to be in this world that isn't built for you.
Yeah.
And now I'm meeting somebody who fought back and prevailed.
Yeah.
And it's like, we can do that.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not relegated to taking whatever charity we're given, but we have rights. And it was like, wow. So, and Judy started Disabled in Action in New York City. And as a teenager, Disabled in Action was, I think they're still around, disability rights group. And I started going to meetings and doing things outside of camp. So, I mean, you have that going on, and then it's also the times, the early 70s.
Yeah.
Vietnam War is still going on, protests in the streets, different liberation movements. And Judy, she recalls being in the bunks at night and talking about how people with disabilities needed their own movement.
Yeah.
And I don't think we were talking about that in the boys' bunk. I think we were probably talking about the girls in the girls' bunk.
Yeah.
But they had loftier conversations on at the time. And just in regards to talking about this group, so let me just fill in two other things. Some of the folks you see in the film, I mean, they had all gone to special school together with Judy, Neil Jacobson, and Steve Hoffman. And so they were all friends from way back. When Judy comes out to Berkeley to help run the Center for Independent Living with Ed Roberts, it was like she was like had gone to another country.
Yeah.
And she was calling back to the old country and saying, the ramps are paved with gold. You must come out here because, there's no snow. There's curb cuts. Center for Independent Living. We help you find some attendant care or somebody to build a ramp or housing or help you get on SSI. And it's like, this was like a no-brainer for everybody to kind of like reinvent the community that we experienced at camp and in New York, but out there under a lot better circumstances.
In the real world, like where you can, where it's not just a summer, where this is looking like it's every day, all the time. I mean, that's what I mean. I was watching it. I was literally like watching it thinking we're even, all these years later. And I'm thinking, imagine if this was just everywhere, not in cities and you're just anywhere being like, I could just pick up a phone and say, okay, what's our next step now that now that when he's ready for moving out on his own, where do we go? Where do we call? What's our next step? So we can transition like it should. I mean, obviously I think any teenager needs that next step, learning and transition, but it's the same idea. Like what's our next step? What's our transition? And how do we kind of do that so that it's, an easier transition into that real world? And the fact that was just happening, and obviously it's not easy, but it was doable on a level then when there are things way less accessible than there are now. It's doable. There aren't excuses.
Things are a little bit more loose also. There was a great sense of community and people really sharing resources and, gee, my attendant's sick, you can call up somebody and usually make a connection, but because it wasn't a huge, Berkeley is not the biggest city in the world. So, people, really were really, really tight. I think that you see that kind of camaraderie and community spirit in our film, that was really the secret to the success of the 504, the sitting in the federal building. The 504 regulations signed.
Right.
And look, gee, Jim, what's happening today? Well, let me tell you, the activists that I'm seeing today, it's the same way.
Yeah.
Everybody's kind of looking out for each other.
Yeah.
The disability justice movement was something that I was not aware of until a few years ago, but it's really looking at disability rights through the lens of Blacks and Indigenous and people of color and folks from the LGBTQI communities. Mm-hmm. That kind of not the non-traditional voices of what we are used to kind of hearing from.
Yeah.
And these are the people who are really doing the incredible work nowadays. They remind me of what I see in the film from the sit-in.
Yeah. And,
when the going got tough in Northern California, it was people there that basically, like with COVID, there was a group that was started by a few people, including Stacey Milburn, called the Disability Justice Culture Club. And they gathered and were able to kind of do mutual aid, where, they were bringing food and medicine and to people for which leaving the house was very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
Because of the pandemic. And anyway, I'm really happy that one of the things that Nicole and I were able to do was to hand our impact campaign for our film off to Stacy and another woman, Andrea Levant, and who were very, very, very knowledgeable in that community. And one of the highlights of this was that we've been doing virtual Crip camps every Sunday.
Yeah, I saw that just kind of, you guys were doing that every evening on site. Well, evening here.
Every Sunday.
Yeah.
And it's going through the end of August, but we've had some incredible speakers and folks talking about all sorts of different issues, including, self-care and Black disabled history. And you might have remembered that President Obama and Mrs. Obama's production company is our executive producers in Crip Camp.
Yeah.
Well, we about 3 or 4 weeks ago, President Obama joined our Crip Camp and hung out for about 45 minutes or so, and it was a.
That's awesome.
That was just a remarkable experience.
There's nothing like President Obama just drops in, no big deal.
It was unannounced. We knew this was going to happen, but we all kept our lips shut, and but it was unannounced, and Twitter all of a sudden goes, bro.
Oh, I bet.
But the sweetest thing really was, as we often do when we're on panels, we'll describe ourselves. And so I should probably describe myself for, I guess no one's losing out on the fact that they don't need to know that I'm, I got a scraggly hat on and my hair is going all over the place. But President Obama, did his description because we were on Zoom. And saying, I've got more gray hair than I used to, and I'm sitting in my home office, and I got a picture of myself and my family swimming, in Hawaii, where I was born. And the meaning behind him doing his audio description of himself as a protocol that so many of us do. Showed such solidarity and respect and understanding for us, and Lord knows we could use a lot more of that.
Yes, I think it means so much too that even just that short amount of time though, that he's willing to take. He's not necessarily part of this community, but he's willing to put the time in to kind of say, this is important to me because it's important to the world. This difference needs to be made.
Yeah. It didn't hurt that Judy Heumann had worked in his administration also in the State Department, but
there you go.
It wasn't the reason that he was there. I mean, this is, we're the first film that, Higher Ground is their production company. And their first film that came out was American Factory, but they had purchased that kind of already made, and they purchased it at Sundance. And we were still, Nicole and I were still in production. We were still finishing up shooting and editing, and they came on early. And the two principals at Higher Ground, Priya Somanathan and Tonya Davis, they just really rolled up their sleeves with us, and got the Obamas themselves looked at some cuts and gave some, some notes. And so,
but I think that's even more important, that they're not just saying, oh, here you go. They're participating. Right. It's important to them.
You're so right.
I just gotta edit when I called her the wrong name.
Listen, this editing is taking forever. I have to go grocery shopping.
Yeah. That's why you should go to Instacart right now. They connect you with a personal shopper in your local area to deliver groceries from your favorite stores. Instacart delivers groceries in as fast as 1 hour.
Hey, listeners, by following the link in our show notes, you help support our show. By doing this, Instacart is offering our listeners free delivery on your first order over $35.
And I think we all know that, when we go out in the world, if we are dealing with people who are not that familiar with disability, we are often either willingly or unwillingly kind of becoming like ambassadors for the planet disabled.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you kind of want to make it easier for the next person. And you want to explain kind of what's going on here, because it's not all about Braille menus and wheelchairs.
Right.
And that it is about love and affection and culture and sex and community.
Exactly.
And not that some of us will talk about sex in the first conversation, but it just depends on the situation. People don't know that there's a disabled community.
Well, I think
that people identify culturally as disabled.
Well, I think the whole, like, and I know that I'm not disabled. I'm a parent of someone who's disabled. And, we have 2 children that are, going through their own difficulties, and, but we are still a part of this community, and we are here advocating for them on an everyday basis. And we're going through it our own way as well some days. And so, we still experience it in our own ways a lot of the time. And so many, just like you said, like so many times, like we're walking around being advocates a lot of the time, but there are days where it's like, we just want to be like, hey, we just want to be mom and dad. I don't want to have to teach you something just because you came up to us and, I don't want to have to teach you that this is how it is. I just want to be Kristen and Eddie, or mom and dad to, our kids. Or there are days where we really have had to have conversations with each other multiple times where we've said, listen, today was really hard, but unfortunately this is the world we're in, and we have to know that this is just the job we have, that it's to teach someone who, and we've said this many, many times on the show, the word ignorant, and not in a negative way. Ignorant literally just means they don't know as much, but like it's our job to just teach someone who's ignorant to something to just learn more about it.
Look, ignorance is dangerous.
Yeah.
Simply it is.
It's our job to just teach somebody something. And I didn't ask for the job. It's the job I have as a parent. And if I don't do it, my son and daughter aren't going to learn that job, and they're not going to teach. They're not going to be advocates for themselves.
Well, I just would first, I really want to honor what you're saying and your honesty, because so often I think even parents have to kind of come off like these angels.
Well, we're not that.
But you know what I mean? It's like, you're so inspirational. It's like, no, actually, I'm really having a crappy day, and we all deserve that. And like, I've certainly said to my wife, Sarah, I want a day off.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to leave the house. I don't want to have to deal with the outside world. It's not like it's better in the Bay Area because there's so many people with disabilities, but it's like, I just want a day off from being disabled.
Yeah. You can't take it off and change it. We actually had this conversation in this house the other day, and we're talking about something else, and without getting all into it, but we were talking about our son, and Eddie had to kind of say, he can't take it off. He can't. And we are lucky, not lucky, but he has, for lack of a better word, most of the time, a invisible disability, which I hate as a word, but it really is, like, where, if he's got jeans on that are a little bit baggier, and he doesn't have his braces on, and he's not walking around too much, and he doesn't need to go long distance, he's not using his wheelchair, you probably don't know he has a disability. And so, but if he's at school, the kids at school know he does, because he's walking around with them more. He's a little bit slower behind the other kids. They know he wears braces. He walks differently. And so he can't take that off and be like everybody else. Like, it's just not going to be like that. And so he's aware of that now. He's older, where he's understanding that. And so that just doesn't, it's just part, and he knows he goes to the bathroom differently. He knows everything. It just isn't going to go away. And so it's one of those conversations where, like, you can say any day, like, oh, I'm anxious or this. And those are real issues. But we can find coping mechanisms. There's medication. There's lots of different things to kind of work through those things. There's nothing that he can work through that's just going to make this easier. It's there. It's not going anywhere. It's his day. And, I feel for him that, the best I can say to him is there are just going to be easy days and there's going to be hard days. And we just have to get through the hard ones and enjoy the easy ones. And those are our days. There's not really any better things I can say for him.
I mean, I think that all of us, disabled or not, you got to cut yourself some slack.
Yeah.
Sometimes, sometimes you really just have a really lousy day.
Yeah.
And what you want to do is I just want to have dinner and climb into bed.
Yeah.
And that it's okay. You don't have to be, you don't have to be, a super person every day. And that it's good to really feel your feels.
Yeah.
And the most important thing, and Nicole and I really had this kind of as our one word that was really a guiding light for us throughout the making of the film and even past that, which is the word community. And that we found community at camp.
Yeah.
People found community and trust in the other people that were sitting in for 26 days in that federal building so many years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You need, especially when you're younger, to see things modeled for you. I always think that role model as a wheelchair user is kind of a funny, term, but it's really the truth. And that's what I needed. And that's what I got at Camp Jenad.
Yeah.
Seeing these people with disabilities as counselors and other folks who had lives.
Yes.
And so I think there's a balance between like being mainstreamed and, and being, with all the other kids.
Yeah.
But I think there's also some real benefit to things like sports programs.
Yeah.
Like wheelchair basketball or other things that I know that I did. I did some wheelchair sports when I was in my 20s because I certainly didn't have anything for me when I was in high school. But that kind of socializing with other people and is just really, really, really important.
Yeah, just seeing. I think that we actually saw that happen for real in this house. Like Eddie wasn't. I mean, he's younger, so he wasn't real into doing, much of anything. He was probably like 5, 4.5, 5, and. We were hit, but his sister was doing a lot of different sports, and we are part of a program here, CHD, that does some disability programs and disability advocacy, and they do wheelchair basketball. They do they do just lots of different ones. And they do sled hockey. They do sled hockey, and they kind of invited us to be a part of it. And he was so tiny, and we were like, "Oh, we'll try it." And he wasn't real interested, and it was cold, and he didn't really want to do it. And so at first, we weren't going to push him, and then we kind of just kept saying, "Let's just keep going. Let's keep going." And then we met a gentleman I say gentleman, to me, he's a kid, but he's like 19 and he's on the USA sled hockey team and he's local and he has Spina Bifida and
number 19, Kyle's it.
That's all it took. That's all it took for my son to be sled hockey all the time. Like all he wanted to do is sled hockey like Kyle all the time. And in that sled on the ice, chasing Kyle. Like if Kyle was there, he was there. If Kyle was going to come visit, if Kyle was going to be on the ice, he wanted to hang out with Kyle.
I can't wait to show him how fast I am.
Show how fast he was. And then now Eddie plays too with him to try it out. And
so I get excited to show how Kyle, show how fast I am. I can't turn it all. I just go really fast right into the wall.
Right into the wall. Yeah, good.
Still not as fast as Kyle, but it's pretty cool. But yeah, just that, something I wouldn't have thought about. I wouldn't have pushed him. I would have just been, oh, never mind. But it was that connection of seeing somebody do it, somebody accomplish it like him. And then say, oh, okay, yeah. And, because he just thought, I can't do this. It's not for me. He needed to see it. He needed to see it modeled for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Yeah. So, and the other thing, I wanted to point out that I just think it's a little off topic, but I wanted to say that, everybody that I thought in the film that I think really stood out to me, and it's a testament for how wonderfully you guys, set out that film, showed everybody had a voice. There isn't anybody at that camp, anybody at the sit-ins, anybody that just didn't have a voice, and that really just showed that, because I think so often people with disabilities don't get a voice because it's assumed they don't need one or they don't have one. And as a parent and an advocate in this community, I have so many friends with children, and that people just assume they don't have a voice. They don't have something to say.
Yeah.
They're living and people are living in this world. They have something to say. And it was really, not only was it amazing to see everyone had a voice, but everyone was kids, even those counselors are all kids in this film. I mean, I'm an adult, so to me, they're all kids. Like everybody in that film is a child, they're all kids under, 20 something kids. It was pretty exciting to kind of just see everyone had a voice. And I'm a firm believer that giving people voices helps make change. I don't think there would have been so much change happening and so much advocacy to this day with everybody in that film if there wasn't everyone having that opportunity.
Yeah, but no one was going to give those folks the voice.
Yeah.
They had to go out and demand it and keep pushing and pushing and pushing and putting their lives in danger to make that happen. Because, and this is stigma. This is why it's so important for films and television shows to be made.
Yeah.
That really show us who we are and what we are.
What you're capable of.
As opposed to, some horrible films that keep on getting made about, I don't know. I didn't want to give them the light of day.
Exactly.
There's just a lot of negative tropes. There's a lot of negative tropes around disability that really have no place in filmmaking or on anybody's screen anymore.
Yeah. We want to see some change in filmmaking, and I know I want to see out there more documentaries and things like that, but I want to see it for the positive. And I know you had mentioned that, there's a tendency for people to kind of go out and make a negative out of it and have that rhetoric of what I've noticed, the pity, documentary in a way of, making it look negative. I hate it. I'm not a fan of it.
We could unpack this one issue around kind of representation of people with disabilities in the media. And it would take us a couple of hours.
Yeah.
So, or at least that's the way it feels to me as somebody who's worked in film and television for a long time. I think that what I want to see changed is representation and misrepresentation being actually authentic. And so some of the examples of real negative films are the kind of the tropes that we have seen over the years. And I'm certainly, they are the inspirational stories or the story of pity or overcoming all odds or being what we joke is well, here's this super cripple who climbed Half Dome with his pinkies and my gosh, everybody, you can do it. There's no reason for you not to be able to.
The only disability is a bad attitude.
The inspirational porn.
Yeah, well, we're talking about Stella Young, right? I mean, have you seen her TED Talk?
Yes.
Stella Young, and may she rest in peace. But there's that incredible TED Talk that she did on inspiration porn, and when I'm talking with people or realizing there's some things that they could really benefit from learning about disability and kind of, sending people to that TED Talk is one of the things I do.
Yeah.
So sending people over to Alice Wong's website, the Disability Visibility Project is extremely important also. And I mean, these are just two of hundreds of resources that, one can point folks to in regards to saying, you may think you understand, but unless you understand the concepts beyond, about inspiration porn, or that if you don't really dive deeply into disability justice, you don't know enough.
Right.
And this is aimed at like Hollywood and, producers and directors and writers.
Yeah.
And so when you look at films like Me Before You, in which you got a character, this guy who becomes a quadriplegic and is filthy rich. He falls in love with this woman who's kind of supposed to be his caretaker, but still decides that, even after all this wonderful stuff, I still want to go into, I don't know, Switzerland.
Yeah.
To become euthanized. It's like, why?
Yeah.
Why? I mean, why would you want to have that be a story
right
you would put your name on as a director or a producer or a studio?
Exactly.
Why? What is the purpose of this? How is that possibly doing anything good in the world?
Exactly.
Because it's not.
Yeah.
Because there are people making decisions about us as people with disabilities who will see this film and think, boy, I got to tell you, I just, that's such a horrible life. And boy, can I really relate. And thank God I saw this film, because now I really understand what it's like to become a quadriplegic.
Yeah. And it's so not the story.
No.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and how do you want to be even the actor in that movie? There's so many people at play. This isn't just an op-ed piece and one person's writing it and maybe one person's publishing it. And so there's two people making a misstep. There's a lot of people at play making a movie, or making, where all of these people are signing off on something, and there's a bunch of actors involved, and where it's tough for me to kind of get behind something when someone just goes, oh, that was a misstep. I really wasn't thinking that one through, when I'm like, all of these people were involved in making this happen. And it's hard for me to think that everybody wasn't thinking that one through. And someone didn't just put their hand up and go, this doesn't sit right. I'm not quite sure this is the story. I don't think this is how someone's full life goes. This isn't how someone's story is. I think that when anyone's writing a book or a story or a screenplay or anything, you're writing it because obviously things are fiction, but you're usually writing something 99% of the time, even when it's far fiction, because it's based on some sort of storyline, so people can relate to it.
I could be wrong about this, because I literally know about this particular film just by what other people have told me. I can
guess which film we're talking about, and I definitely didn't see it, but I definitely know.
No, I'm talking about You Before Me Before You.
Yeah.
but I believe, and everybody can fact check me on this, I don't think that's how the book ended.
Yeah. Oh, so it was like an interpretation of. Yeah. That makes me a little sadder for who wrote the book.
Well, I got to say that who was in the room? I mean, when you're not in the room, this kind of stuff happens.
Yeah.
And so when we're not in the writers' rooms, when we're not in the boardrooms, when we're not producers, when we're not directors, this is going to happen. And I'm sorry. I'm just, I'm kind of pausing my words, because I feel the pain.
Yeah.
I feel the pain because I can also see how this is played out in the world. And, what we need isn't like everything is just fine. Doesn't matter if you're, a quadriplegic now, your life will, go on. Don't worry about it. No, it's a big deal. It's you don't want this to happen, but what you want people to know is the reality of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And you want people to see films and see people who are relatable, who are not like untouchables in that they're either, like I mentioned, this like, super athletes, or that they are people who are just pitiful and have given up.
Yes.
You need to see. This film would not be so damaging if there were 100 other films,
right,
in which the disability experience was shown, and we could see a wide breadth of storylines and experiences. I wouldn't find it as harmful if that wasn't one of the, the few things that we see.
Well, I think that's key
in media.
I think it's key that, you just kind of hit the nail on the head there. There's two things where one is, representation matters. Being in the room matters. We say this across the board, and it's not just in the disabilities community. It's being a minority, of the world in general, whether it's the color of your skin or your sexual orientation or having a disability or whatever it might be, you're not in the room when these decisions are being made. You're not getting represented as a whole. And whether you're in the room or not, it shouldn't matter. We should just be representing. But unfortunately, the way that it is you have to be in the room to get heard. So let's put people in the rooms so that the change can happen. And the big thing, I think, the second part of that is, and we've kind of said this before, and we've noticed it when we watch, I'm like a big fan of like BBC TV and things like that, is a lot of what we do see when we do see things on TV, movies and film it's the disability or whatever it might be first. The storyline is that first, and the rest of the story second, versus the storyline first and the disability maybe is just there. I think I would love to just see more of, I think that's important too sometimes, depending on the storyline, where maybe there's a storyline where the disability is part of the storyline because that's the story. But I also think that there should just be, we've seen so many other things on British TV that I've watched or other European TV shows where there are actors in shows that have disabilities, and that is not even a conversation. It's not even addressed. They're just actors, and they probably just auditioned for a part. It wasn't written into the script. I would love to see more of that type of representation here in the United States. I think it's really, really important because that's how the change happens, I think, more, because then it just becomes, crazy to say, the norm.
I mean, I think that if you look at other marginalized communities and seeing what has happened to them over the course of the last 30, 40 years on television and film, you can see I think a parallel between what's happening with people with disabilities. And now, my gosh, on television, 40 years ago, if there was a character who was African American, it often was about their experience, as opposed to them just happening to be a shop owner or just happening to, that they are, a fireman. It was like, man, the system and the man and all sorts of other crap.
The token.
So we're like, well, not even just token, that the reason that they're in this show is because they're going to talk about their experience versus them being just simply part of society. And I think we're 30 years behind in all of this. I joke with people that I am looking forward to the day when I'm watching a TV show, and behind in the back, there's a one-armed barista making somebody an espresso drink.
Yes.
And it's just that, that person is there.
Just an extra.
It is. But yet audiences, I think, are going to need to see more and more of people with disabilities simply as part of the background or part of characters and stuff. Before you get people stop worrying about that being distracting.
Yeah. Now, how do you think that we can speed that up? I mean, I see we've kind of sped things up a little bit when it comes to like sports. we see a lot of outreach in the community with, the disabilities community with sports and encouraging youth to kind of get more involved there. Do you see a way to kind of get youth more involved in film and television to kind of really boost that? I mean, we spoke with Mindy from Runway of Dreams, and now they're working with Gamut Management. And I know she's kind of pushing the envelope there a little bit to kind of get people more involved with the, it's more print and a little bit of film and television, but, is that kind of the way to do it, to kind of get more kids involved a little bit and outreach that way to speed things up?
Well, yeah, I think that film is a great way to go about it. And I was very fortunate. I feel fortunate that I was asked to be a judge on this year's Easter Seals film challenge. And it's all about making a 5-minute film over, a short period of time, and that it needs to be about disability or have disabled people, either as directors or in it. And, there were some really top-notch films there.
Wow.
I mean, very well shot, great graphics, interesting use of animation, wonderful performances, and people being very, very authentic. And I just loved what I saw. And so, yeah. And I think that as we, are in, I think we all touch other people in our lives, right? And if you can advocate for people, and if you see apprenticeships or you see some kind of training program, ask, who are the people with disabilities that are part of your group? Oh, we don't have anybody. We don't know where to find them. Well, you haven't tried hard enough.
Yeah.
Or, well, shucks, we're up a flight of stairs. It was the only place we could find that we could afford. Really?
Yeah.
You made that decision, did you?
Put the pressure on.
Why? Yeah. In other words, you can call it out. You can call it out and be nice about it. You can call it out and be unhappy about it. But until people call out discrimination and tell people that the status quo is no longer valid and is harmful, and it's kind of one of those things, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem, things will not change as quickly. Now, I say this very cavalierly. I think it's tough sticking your neck out and being the one that raises their hand or stops somebody from talking when you realize they're excluding people with disabilities.
Yeah.
But I think that we all in our own ways can find ways to be advocates and speak up.
Yeah.
And I think that right now, I think there's a lot of fire in the world right now about looking at diversity and inclusion, and that seeing more and more film festivals and companies and all sorts of other places looking at disability and not just kind of shying away from it and thinking that it's too hard, or not realizing that it's important to include people with disabilities in their diversity agenda.
Yeah, I mean,
how did that happen? It isn't charity.
No,
it's people saying, if you really want to say that you really are socially conscious, that you really do care about how we're treating people and not excluding people, you can't avoid the issue of disability.
Yeah.
And it's not impossible to deal with it. You just have to be willing to do it. And if you feel uncomfortable, I'm sure you felt uncomfortable about other areas around us about diversity. Do it. Yeah. Stop it.
Yeah. Now's the time. There's not another time. Like you can't wait to make that decision. I mean, or we're going to continue to wait. I think, we've seen that with, other times and other issues. It's just, you wait until the cup boils over, and, at what point are you just like, okay, now's the time. And I think and you can't wait till it affects you. I think that's the big thing we've learned. I mean, both of us have been kind of the type of people, even before we had children, advocates in the disabilities community, obviously more so now that we have children, but both of us have been. And I think that was probably something we learned from our parents and just part of our nature. But really, we've learned now with our children, it's like, we need to kind of just, when we talk with other people, as we meet people, it's just like, this isn't affecting just our family. This affects everybody around us, because that's the thing that's tricky about this community is that, yes, you know, my son was born with a disability, but you might wake up tomorrow and get hit by a truck and be a paraplegic. And so now it's part of your community too. Or you might, someone you're related to might, you know, it's just, it's the largest minority. So it's not really a minority. So let's just get on board and stop making it a minority in a way of excluding everybody. And let's just make this part of the conversation, I think, is so important.
I think you can rephrase it and say, stop making this a community that's marginalized.
Yes.
You know, it's like, indeed, you know, yeah, if you look at statistics, maybe you say 1 out of 4 people have disabilities, but it's, you know, it's something that cuts across all strata of society, and we are a club that anybody can join at any time.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's just, and I think this all the time, and that's just, you know, quote unquote disabilities that are being, whatever you want to say, like tracked. There are so many people going through depression or anxiety or any other struggles that might have their own special needs or difficulties that really fall under the same difficulties and have the same type of things that we also can have conversations about. And they're sitting at home and having a lot of the same troubles that somebody else might be having, and they're not having conversations because they feel like they don't belong to the same kind of community. And they're being marginalized in the same way. You know, mental health issues, I feel like all the time just get overlooked because they don't feel like they belong part of a community. And I think that also the fear and stigma around mental health issues or developmental issues are so great and so overpowering that it's not like people are overlooking it. It's like, I don't know how to deal with this. And it's like, again, it's the same thing with disability or other groups that one stigmatize. You don't know. Yeah. You really don't know. Yeah. All you hear about are in the news or media or what makes for exciting television. All right.
Are people who, oh my God, he went off his meds, there's bloodshed all over the place. And it's just like, please.
Yeah.
For the love of God.
Exactly. Like,
please.
We should just be a community. And if someone's going through something, we're just there for each other, period. End of conversation. It really doesn't matter what it is. And we're a society in human nature of community. I mean, it's literally part of our genetics. So I'm not sure when we're seeing it during COVID for sure. We're becoming people, even with like schooling, they're all like creating these little community schooling type atmospheres now, while some parents have to go to work and other parents are virtually schooling, and everyone's kind of creating these little virtual school community type atmospheres. And they're all getting back to this whole idea of community. Now is the time to remember that that's what's in our, human nature. A lot of, anthropologists will say like there's tribes that all the women raise all the children. Doesn't matter whose child's yours. They're all raising all the children. Mm-hmm. That's the community we need to remember that we are, and just be taking care of our own, which is each of us. Doesn't really matter what's going on. We should just be taking care of each other and caring about each other. That's my soapbox.
Yeah. Well,
so
unfortunately, that's not the kind of world we live in right now. Or, That's why they write science fiction.
Well, hopefully little things and everybody kind of does their part and we slowly get to a good spot. I think definitely, documentaries like what you guys have put out really hits home for people. And I know it did for us. And I know even people we've spoken to and we've referred to the documentary have said it was definitely even more than what they expected. It's hit home for them. It's made a difference for them. And beyond just the story and I say characters because everybody in your documentary is such a character and has such a wonderful personality. But, the history behind the 504 and how you guys got there and how we've gotten there is just such a fantastic story that I feel like it's one of those things where it's like it should be in everybody's history books. These are things we all need to know on how we got here. So I think it's, we throw out the word 504 so often in our house. And so I think it's really exciting that, you get to hear the history behind how everything becomes something. That I think is really awesome.
Nicole and I had a wonderful experience. When we premiered the film at the Sundance Film Festival in January, and a family comes, and Nicole and I are going up Main Street, going someplace, and the family comes over to us and says, my kids are part of the 504 generation. And I never heard somebody talk about it that way, but
Generation 504 instead of Generation X.
Yeah, exactly. And now we have, Generation 88.
Yeah.
And just it made me really happy.
I mean, you guys, had a part in creating that, which is really, really cool.
Well, I am grateful to be part of telling this story of the history of our community and this one story. I may have mentioned this earlier, but there's thousands of stories.
Yeah.
And this is one particular story about a moment in time and a group of people that all met at this incredible summer camp. And I think it's a lesson that one person can really start a movement.
Yeah.
And certainly there was a disability rights movement before Judy and the other people that you see, Judy Heumann and the other people you see in the film. But it's literally, you or anybody listening to this could start a movement within their own community.
Yeah. And you never know what it'll create.
You never know. The power of collaboration. I've seen it played out over and over in my life that, when you're collaborating with somebody, 1 + 1 does not equal 2. It's greater than 2.
Yeah.
And it is, it very, very quickly becomes so powerful, or it can become so powerful. And so I just think that we live in a very complex and amazing time right now, and it's full of sadness and cruelty, but also hope and possibilities, and that we've got an ability to communicate amongst ourselves that is so much more immediate and close than we had back in the 1970s, or really even in the in the 90s. And that, my gosh, when Judy Heumann, and Disabled in Action were trying to gather people together for a demonstration, they used a phone tree. One person calls somebody else, and that person calls 2 other people, who then call 2 other people, or 3 other people.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're reaching 100 people in a short period of time. So it's possible.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing, Jim, we ask all of our guests, although you have given some amazing advice tonight, is if you have 30 seconds to speak to our community, what advice would you give them?
Find your tribe, find your community, take care of yourself. I think we live under this pressure that we have to excel harder and higher than anybody else just to have a level playing field. But you also have to make sure that you're not hurting yourself.
Yeah.
And that you love yourself. And so finding that balance for me has been a lifelong struggle, but it is something I've learned later in life how important it is.
Yeah.
So
that's great.
And so love yourself.
I like it. So what's next for, I mean, I know you guys are just kind of wrapping up the Crip Camp virtual experience. What's kind of on the agenda next for you, for Crip Camp? What's kind of down the line?
Nicole and I are both kind of looking at what projects we may want to move on to. We're in discussions about this wonderful community that has rallied around our film. And then it's been sparked by these virtual Crip camps every Sunday afternoon. And we're just starting to really kind of consider what we'd like to do in 2021 and how we might be able to fund that.
Yeah.
But I don't think you've heard The Last of Us beyond. Certainly, you're not going to be hearing The Last of Us after the last virtual camp happens at the end of August. And, doors have been opening for all of us and myself. And I want to continue working in television and film.
Awesome.
Either as a writer or a producer or as a director. And I get some interesting emails every once in a while. So
good. I mean, I think this is another chapter. I mean, I think it's like a whole new beginning in a way. I think I'm excited to see kind of what it unrolls and unfolds for you guys and the community as a whole. Kind of excited.
Literally in the last couple of months, I've seen so many great things on social media about people who've gotten jobs or a company has started an initiative or that people, there are other shows that are in development now.
Yeah. That
I am like, wow, there was none of this going on a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
At least I wasn't aware of it.
No.
And look at what's happening now.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a bright future out there in that, and I'm really, I really believe that things are really just going to improve and we should really enjoy this moment in time and be hopeful about the future.
Awesome. I'm excited. So where can we find everything? I think it's just cripcamp.com, right?
Yeah, cripcamp.com. There's a lot of good information there.
Awesome.
And lesson plans and such and other resources. So that's a good way. And certainly you can also get a hold of us through info@cripcamp.com.
Perfect. And we'll link everything on all of our sites and our social media and everything and make sure that we put it all out there for all our listeners.
That'd be great. Make sure you put a link to Disability Visibility Project.
Perfect. We will do that.
I think it's a wonderful. And Judy Human, who has a memoir that's out.
Awesome.
Becoming Human, and it's a wonderful. I think it's a read that a lot of people would really, really love.
Definitely, we will do that. Awesome. Thanks so much, Jim. We appreciate everything, and for you jumping back on with us after our mini weather incident. We appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. I really, really enjoyed this, and I love you guys. You're great.
Oh, thanks.
And I hope you have continued success, and everybody spread the word about this.
Yes.
You guys are fantastic.
Yeah.
All right.
Please do. Well, thank you. If I can get Eddie back out to California, we'll try to hit you up because it's my favorite place.
I don't know. There's just so many people.
Yeah.
That's the point.
I don't like a lot of people.
Well, thanks for your time, Jim. Really, we appreciate it.
Okay.
Awesome.
Take care of you two, all right?
Have a good one.
Okay, I'm going to sign off now.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Well, thank you so much for listening. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. As always, please make sure you share with a friend and leave a review.
You can find all the resources mentioned in this episode on our Facebook or Instagram on @specialaboutspecial. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon.